The Fireless Prince in the dark mountains of Erendor, where the clouds touched the stone towers and dragons ruled the sky, a strange story began. The dragon prince Kael was born without fire, while other young dragons roared flames that painted the night in gold. His breath was cold and empty. The elders called him cursed. The king, his father, tried every ancient ritual to spark fire within his son, but nothing worked. Kael grew quiet, hiding in the caves away from the eyes that pitied him. Far below the mountain kingdom was a ruined mining station, where humans once worked before the dragons took control. Now only one human remained, a janitor named Eli. He cleaned the tunnels for scraps of metal to survive. He was small, fragile, and very old, but his eyes still held warmth, the kind Kael had never seen before. One evening Kael came down the mountain alone. He wanted to see the world of humans, even if dragons said it was forbidden. He followed the sound of something strange, a soft, sharp tune that rose and fell through the air. It was whistling. Eli sat beside an old pipe, his broom leaning on the wall, whistling a slow melody that echoed through the tunnels. Kael stopped in the shadows, watching. He did not understand how a sound so small could fill such silence. Eli looked up and smiled. "Come closer." "A young one," he said gently. Kael stepped out, his golden scales catching the faint light. Eli's smile didn't fade, even as the dragon's shadow covered him. "You can talk?" Eli asked. Kael nodded slowly. "Yes." "You are not afraid?" Eli chuckled softly. "Afraid? Son, I've been alone so long, even ghosts would be good company." Kael tilted his head. "What were you doing?" "That sound." "That?" Eli said with a grin. "Whistling, it's a human thing, helps pass the time." Kael frowned. "It feels alive." Eli nodded. "It is. Everything alive has a song. You just have to let it out." For the first time, Kael felt something stir in his chest, not heat, but wonder. "Can I do it?" he asked. Eli laughed softly. "Anyone can whistle. Prince or peasant," Kael tried, his great lips shaping the air awkwardly, but no sound came. Eli guided him, showing him how to press air through his teeth. After many tries, Kael made a faint trembling note. It was weak, broken, but it was music, he laughed, and the cave walls shimmered with his joy. For the next few days, Kael returned to Eli's tunnels. He learned new tunes, simple songs the old man remembered from Earth. They sat together, one human, one dragon, their whistles blending like wind and flame. But Kael never mentioned his secret. He didn't tell Eli that he, the dragon prince, could not breathe fire. One night a storm raged outside. Lightning cracked against the peaks, and thunder rolled across the mountains. Kael came down again, but this time something was wrong. The air felt heavy, his chest burned. When he opened his mouth to whistle, a spark flickered from his throat. Eli saw it, a tiny flash of orange that died too soon. What was that? Eli whispered, eyes wide. Kael looked frightened. "It happened before." "Only when I whistle." Eli stood slowly, his gaze firm now. "Then maybe your fire isn't gone, it's just waiting for the right song." Kael's heart pounded. Could that be true? Could a human tune awaken dragonfire? He tried again, whistling the melody Eli had taught him. Slow, deep, rising and falling like the wind. The spark returned, brighter, longer this time. Before fading again, Kael gasped, trembling. "It's there. I can feel it." Eli smiled proudly. "Then don't stop, Prince. Keep whistling." And so he did. The storm outside roared, but the tunnel filled with a different sound, the sound of a dragon's heart awakening. Each note carried warmth, memory, and something ancient. For the first time, Kael felt a flicker of fire inside his soul, not from anger, not from magic, but from music, and far above the mountain, unseen by both. The clouds glowed faintly red, as if the gods themselves had opened their eyes again. The spark beneath the storm the next morning. Smoke rose over the mountains of Erendor, not the smoke of battle, but the soft breath of a young dragon learning to live. Kael woke with his chest warm, his dreams still filled with music. He had heard the wind singing with him, and the fire inside him whispering in reply. Eli waited in the tunnel, sitting beside his small fire made of old metal and oil. He looked up as Kael entered, his eyes bright. "Morning." "Prince of Silence," he said with a grin. Kael smiled shyly. "Not silence anymore." Eli chuckled. "No, not anymore." Kyle sat near him, careful not to break the ground beneath his claws. He had practiced whistling all night, and the air around him still carried that faint sound. Eli handed him a piece of carved wood, shaped like a small flute. "It's an old toy," he said. "We humans used to call it a whistle stick. Maybe it can help you breathe easier." Kyle turned it carefully in his claws, his golden eyes thoughtful. He tried blowing through it, and a high note filled the tunnel. The spark flickered again in his throat, a brief orange light that made the air shimmer. Eli clapped his hands. "There it is! You're getting closer." But far above them, the dragon court was not silent. The king, Kale's father, had sent his guards to search the lower caves. Rumors spread that the prince had been seen with a human. That was forbidden. The ancient laws said dragons and humans must never share breath or song. The council feared what could happen if the blood of dragons and the voice of man ever joined. They called it the Forbidden Harmony, and yet it was already happening. Kale didn't know this. He only knew that when he whistled beside Eli, the world seemed brighter. He felt alive, as if something old was waking in his blood. Eli watched him with quiet pride, his wrinkled hands steady as he tapped a rhythm on the stone. "Music isn't just sound," he said softly. "It's memory. It's what holds the heart together when everything else falls apart." Kyle listened, his eyes glowing faintly with inner light. I can feel my fire listening to it," he whispered. Eli nodded. "Then play it again, louder this time." Kyle drew in a deep breath, his chest glowing from within. He blew through the whistle stick, and this time the note came out strong and clear. The walls shook with the vibration, and sparks danced across his scales like tiny suns. Eli stepped back, awed. "You're calling it, Kale. Your flame is answering." But just as the fire bloomed bright, the sound of heavy wings filled the air above. The guards had found them. The first spear struck the tunnel wall, sending dust down on Eli's shoulders. "Prince Kale," a voice thundered. "By order of the king, step away from the human." Kale's heart froze. He turned toward the light at the tunnel's mouth and saw armored dragons standing there, their eyes hard as iron. Eli looked up, his face calm but pale. "Guess the neighbors found out," he said quietly. Kale growled. "They will not hurt you." The lead guard stepped forward, his wings scraping the ceiling. "The human has no right to teach you, Prince. You bring shame upon our kind." Kyle felt anger and fear twist together inside him. He opened his mouth to speak, but instead, a burst of fire escaped. Small yet fierce, it struck the ground between them. Turning dust into glass, everyone froze. Eli stared in wonder. "Kyle, you did it." The guards looked stunned, unsure if they had just witnessed a miracle or a curse. Kale's voice trembled. "I have fire now." "And it came from him," he said, pointing at Eli. The guards hissed, "Impossible, no human can awaken dragon flame." But Kale stood taller, his wings spreading wide. "Then your laws are wrong." For a long moment, no one moved. The storm outside had calmed, yet lightning still glowed faintly in the clouds. Eli took a step forward, his voice steady though his hands shook. "If a song can wake fire, maybe fire isn't what you think it is." The guards stared at him. Uncertain, Kale looked back at Eli, the faint fire in his throat flickering like a candle. "Come with me," Kyle said quietly. "I will not let them harm you." Eli hesitated. "Up there? To the palace?" Kale nodded. "They will listen to me now, or they will burn trying." The guards drew back, their eyes full of fear and awe. The young prince, once fireless, now glowed like dawn. Eli climbed onto his back, gripping the scales as Kale spread his wings. When they rose through the storm, lightning followed them. Each flash painted the sky gold, as if the gods themselves were watching their flight far below. The guards could only watch as the prince carried the human toward the royal peak. They whispered among themselves. "The fireless one burns again," said one. "And the old prophecy has begun," said another. And in the sky above Erindor, a dragon's whistle echoed across the clouds, a song that woke mountains and made the stars tremble, the song of the forgotten flame. The wind howled over the peaks of Erindor as Kale flew through the clouds. Eli held tightly to his back, the cold biting his skin, yet his heart burned with something stronger. Below them the mountains rolled like sleeping giants, their tops glowing faintly in the stormlight. Kyle's wings cut through the air, each beat echoing like thunder. He had never flown with such strength before. It felt as if the sky itself wanted him to rise. At last they reached the great citadel, carved into the heart of the tallest peak. It shone with red and gold stones, each wall lined with fire crystals that pulsed like living hearts. Dragons filled the air, circling in alarm as the prince landed on the high terrace. Guards rushed forward, their spears gleaming, but stopped when they saw the faint glow still flickering in Kyle's throat. The air around him hummed with power. The Dragon King appeared, his wings vast and black as night. His eyes blazed with sorrow and pride. "Kyle," he said slowly, "you return with fire, and with a human." The words rolled through the palace like thunder. Eli stepped down carefully, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty," he said, voice calm. The dragons hissed at the sound of human speech in the sacred hall, but Kyle stood tall. "Father, he is my teacher," he said. "He showed me how to breathe fire." The hall erupted in shock. The king's tail struck the stone floor, shaking the chamber. "Silence," he commanded. Then he turned his gaze upon the human. "You claim to have awakened my son's fire." Eli met his eyes without fear. "No, Majesty, he awakened it himself. I only taught him to listen." "Listen?" the king repeated. Eli nodded. "To music, to feeling, to life," the king frowned. "Humans and dragons share no song." But Kyle stepped forward, his voice steady. "We do now." He lifted the wooden whistle stick and blew a soft tune. The sound floated through the hall, small yet powerful. Flames rose along the crystal walls, responding to the melody. Every note shimmered in the air like firelight made of sound. The dragons gasped, many stepping back. The old priests whispered among themselves. "The harmony," one said. "For the ancient prophecy." The king's expression changed, from anger to fear. He looked toward the great mural carved behind his throne. A circle of fire and stars with two figures at its heart. A dragon and a human standing together. Long ago the priests had spoken of a time when a song would unite fire and flesh, a time when the gods' forgotten flame would return. It was said that such a bond could either save their world or burn it to ash. The council demanded action. "The human must be destroyed," said one. "His song is forbidden," another cried. "If the prophecy wakes, the gods may rise in wrath." But Kale roared, his voice shaking the pillars. "Enough," he shouted. "If the gods gave us flame, maybe they wanted us to share it." His throat glowed brighter, and a small burst of fire danced into the air, pure and golden. It was not the harsh flame of dragons, but something softer. Almost alive, Eli watched, his eyes filled with quiet wonder. The king stood still, torn between fear and hope. Suddenly the ground trembled. A deep rumble rose from beneath the citadel, shaking dust from the ceilings. The fire crystals dimmed, flickering weakly. Outside, the storm stopped. Every sound vanished. Then a voice echoed across the mountain, deep and ancient. It was not speech, but song, a tone so low that it made the air vibrate. Kyle's wings trembled. "What is that?" he whispered. Eli whispered back, "Something listening to your flame." The priests fell to their knees, crying out, "The gods awaken!" The murals on the walls began to glow, the old carvings moving like living fire. Dragons shouted in fear, but Kyle and Eli stood still. The light from the mural reached toward Kyle, wrapping around him like fire made of memory. The king roared, "Stop this!" But the flame only grew. Kyle's eyes burned gold, and Eli's whistle floated from his hand, glowing brighter than ever. Then everything went silent. The fire vanished, leaving behind a mark on the floor. A spiral of light burned into the stone. Kyle stood at its center, breathing hard. Eli reached out, touching his arm. "You okay?" Kyle nodded slowly. "It didn't hurt, it felt alive." The king approached, staring at the glowing mark. "The flame of the forgotten," he whispered. "It chose you." Eli looked at him. "What does it mean?" The king's voice was low. "It means the god's fire is returning, and so is their judgment." Kyle's wings twitched. "Then we must find out why." Eli smiled faintly. "Guess the lesson isn't over yet." Kyle turned toward the open sky, where the clouds were burning softly in strange patterns. Far away beyond the peaks, something answered with a whisper of its own, a sound like distant whistling carried on the wind. The king stepped back, eyes wide. "The gods are whistling back," he said quietly. And as the sound echoed through the mountains, the first sparks of a new dawn began to rise. But beneath that light, A shadow moved, something older than fire, something that remembered every broken promise made by both dragon and man, the fire that remembers. The morning after the awakening, Erindor was silent. The mountains that once sang with wind now stood still, their peaks covered in mist inside the great hall. The spiral of light still glowed faintly beneath Kyle's feet. Eli stood beside him, his hands dusty from touching the old carvings. Neither spoke for a long time. The air itself felt heavy, like it carried the breath of ancient watchers. Finally, Eli broke the silence. "That sound last night, it wasn't just thunder," Kale nodded. "No, it was the gods calling." His eyes were bright but troubled. "I felt them inside the fire." Eli looked at the mark again. "They called it the Forgotten Flame, right?" Kyle's voice was low. "A power older than dragons, older even than sky." The king entered the hall, his steps echoing softly. Behind him came the priests. Their faces pale, one of them spoke. "The prophecy speaks of two voices, one of fire, one of flesh." Eli met his gaze. "Then it's us." The priest hesitated. "If so, you must find the heart of the flame before it consumes the world." Kyle frowned. "The heart of the flame?" The king nodded slowly. "A place that lies beyond even our reach, the ruins of Etherion." At the name, the air seemed to grow colder. "The city where the gods fell silent," whispered Kale. The council objected at once. "No dragon has returned from those ruins," one said. Another shouted, "The human will doom us all." Kale spread his wings, fire flickering beneath his scales. "Then I will go alone if I must." But the king stepped forward, placing a heavy claw on his shoulder. "No," he said softly. "If the fire has chosen you, then you do not walk this path alone." He turned to Eli. "Human, will you guide him?" Eli nodded, his eyes calm. "If he trusts me, I will, by sunset." They stood on the edge of the world. The sky burned red and gold as Kyle lowered his great body for Eli to climb onto. The wind roared around them, full of storm and song. Eli held the wooden whistle tightly in his hand. "Ready?" Kyle asked. Eli smiled faintly. "As I'll ever be." They rose together into the sky, leaving behind the only home either had known. As they flew over the lands of ash and cloud, Kale felt the pull of something deep within. Each flap of his wings sent sparks scattering through the dark air. Eli watched from his back, his heart pounding with awe and fear. He had never flown this far, this high. Below them the world stretched endless, mountains, seas, and old scars that glowed faintly with forgotten fire. By night they reached the edge of a vast desert. The sand shimmered like glass under the moon. Here the stars seemed closer, brighter, whispering softly. Kale landed beside a broken stone gate, half buried in the dunes. "This was once Etherion," he said quietly. Eli climbed down, his boots sinking into the dust. "So this is where the gods fell silent." They entered the ruins, moving through halls of black crystal and frozen flame. Every wall carried carvings of dragons and humans, standing side by side. Some smiled, others wept. Eli ran his fingers across the symbols. "They were together once," Kyle nodded, "before fear broke them apart." A sudden sound echoed, faint, like a whisper of air through hollow bones. Both froze. Then the voice came again, soft but clear. "Who whistles in the silence of my sleep?" A great light flared above them. A shape formed, not solid, not shadow, but something made of flame and memory. It was tall as the towers of Erindor, its wings made of light. Kyle bowed his head. God of the flame," he whispered. Eli stood still, his heart hammering. The voice spoke again, filling every corner of the ruined city. "Child of fire and child of breath, why have you come?" Kyle answered, "To understand why the flame returned to me." The god's eyes glowed white. "Because the world forgot its song." Eli stepped forward slowly. "We only wanted to bring it back." The light pulsed. "Fire remembers love. Fire remembers loss. But mortals remember fear." Kale looked up. "Can the fire forgive?" The god was silent for a long time. Then it said, "Only if you prove that it still belongs to life, not death." Eli frowned. "How?" The god's voice grew softer. "You must carry it where no dragon dares, into the cold heart of the world." The ground trembled, cracks spreading through the sand. Beneath them a dark pit opened, glowing faintly red at the edges. Kale spread his wings, shielding Eli. "That's the path." The voice replied, "Yes, but beware, the flame will test you both." Then the light faded. Leaving only echoes behind, Eli looked down at the dark pit. Then at Kyle. "Well," he said quietly, "seems your lessons just got harder." Kyle smiled, his eyes burning bright. "Then let's not fail them." Together they stepped toward the edge. The wind rose around them, carrying the faint sound of whistling again, this time not from Eli, but from the earth itself. It was as if the world remembered its own forgotten melody. Kale looked up at the stars, whispering softly, "The gods are still listening." And with one powerful beat of his wings, he leapt into the darkness below, carrying the last spark of the gods' fire into the unknown. The flame beyond death. The fall seemed endless. Kale's wings cut through the storm of fire and shadow. Eli clung to his back. The whistle pressed against his heart. Around them the walls glowed with veins of molten gold. They were diving through the heart of the world itself, and the deeper they went, the louder the whisper of the gods became. "Remember the song," the voice echoed. Kale's scales burned with light, his veins glowing red like rivers of dawn. Eli shouted above the roar, "And Kale, do you hear them?" Kale's eyes shone with fire. "I do, they're calling us home." They landed on a bridge made of black glass hanging above a lake of pure flame. The heat was alive, breathing, moving in its reflection. Eli saw shapes, dragons, humans, and something vast behind them, a memory of what the world used to be. Kale stepped forward. "This is the heart of flame," he whispered. Eli nodded. "And it remembers everything." Then the god's voice returned. "Deep as thunder and gentle as wind, child of fire, child of breath. What will you do with the flame you carry?" Kale looked at Eli, then at the endless fire below. He could feel the power inside him growing, wild, bright, unstoppable. It wanted to burst free, to burn, to cleanse. Eli stepped closer, his hand trembling but steady. "You taught me to fly, Kale," he said softly. "Now let me teach you to breathe." Kyle closed his eyes. The fire rising higher around them, Eli raised the whistle to his lips and began to play. The sound was simple, a slow human tune made of air and heart. It wove through the flames like a thread of calm through chaos. For a moment, the entire world seemed to pause. The fire listened. Kale opened his wings, and for the first time, he did not fight the fire. He sang with it. A deep, resonant sound came from within him. Old as the stars and full of sorrow, the two sounds met, the whistle and the dragon's voice, and became one. The bridge cracked beneath them. The lake flared white, and from the light rose figures made of flame and memory, the forgotten gods. They were vast, beautiful, terrible, and kind all at once. One of them reached out a hand of light. "You remembered the song," it said. Eli lowered the whistle, his breath shaking. "We only reminded it that it still lived." Kyle bowed his head, his body shining like living gold. "The flame does not belong to gods or kings," he said. "It belongs to those who dare to care." The gods smiled, and for the first time the fire cooled. It changed from red to silver, from rage to peace. The heart of the world began to glow softly, as if it were finally resting. Eli looked around in wonder. What happens now? The god's voice came gentle. Now the world begins again. The light spread outward, filling the cracks of the dying earth above. Forests bloomed, rivers returned. The sky blazed with dawn. Kyle spread his wings and lifted Eli into the air, flying through the light. They broke through the surface and rose into the new morning. Below them, Erindor shone like a jewel reborn. The dragons roared, the humans cheered. For the first time in centuries, both species stood under the same sun. Kyle landed softly on the steps of the great hall. The mark of fire on his chest now glowed faintly, no longer a burden but a gift. Eli stood beside him, smiling with tired eyes. "Oh, you did it," Eli said. Kyle shook his head gently. "No, we did." The king approached, his old eyes wet with pride. "The gods are silent again," he said, "but this time in peace." Kyle looked toward the horizon, "Because the world is singing for them." Eli raised the whistle once more and played a few soft notes. Children laughed. Dragons lifted their heads to listen. Even the wind carried the sound gently across the sky. Kyle turned to Eli, his golden eyes warm. "So this is what it means to awaken the gods," Eli smiled. "No," he said softly. "This is what it means to be alive, high above them." The clouds parted, and for just a moment the fire in the heavens formed the shape of wings. Vast, endless and bright, the world had remembered its song. And the fire of the gods slept again, not in anger but in love. The echo of the forgotten flame. The peace did not last long. Though the skies were calm and the rivers bright, something unseen began to stir beneath the light. Kale felt it first, a faint pull in his chest, a whisper that was not his own. He thought it was the memory of the gods, but this voice was different, smaller, sadder and somehow human. Eli noticed the change too. Kale's flame no longer burned steady. It flickered as if the world's breath had become uneven. At night, Kale would stare into the sky where the fire-shaped wings had once appeared. He could still hear the faint hum of the god's song. But now it came mixed with silence, and in that silence, something was calling one evening. As they stood on the edge of the silver sea, Eli turned to him. "Kale," he said, "are you hearing it again, aren't you?" Kale nodded slowly, his golden eyes glowing with dim light. "It's a cry," he whispered. "Someone left behind in the fire." Eli frowned. "But the gods went back to sleep. We saw them fade." Kale's wings trembled. "Not all of them." The next morning, they journeyed toward the mountain of ash, the place where the first dragons were born. The ground was cracked and black, but soft sparks still floated in the air like dying stars. Eli touched one and felt warmth. Not burning, just alive. He looked at Kyle. "It's beautiful." Kyle's voice was quiet. "It's what remains when gods forget to take everything." At the heart of the mountain lay a pit, a perfect circle of darkness surrounded by glowing stones. Kale stepped forward, and the whisper grew louder. It was not in words but feelings and sorrow, hope waiting. Then the darkness moved, and from it came a shape small as a child, bright as the dawn. It was a tiny dragon, scales silver like moonlight, wings made of smoke. It looked at Kale and blinked, eyes full of old fire. Eli gasped. "It's a hatchling." Kale's breath caught. "No," he said slowly. "It's a memory, the last spark of the god's first flame." The little creature walked to Kale and placed its head against his chest. Instantly the flicker in his fire steadied. His heart warmed. Eli watched in awe. "It knows you." Kyle nodded. "Because I am what it used to be." Then a soft voice echoed around them. "Gentle and endless, you woke the gods. Dragon Prince, but in doing so you woke their fear." Eli spun around, but saw no one, only the shifting air. Kale whispered, "Who speaks?" The air shimmered and a figure appeared, and not God. Not dragon, not human, but all three. It had eyes like fireflies and skin like starlight. "I am the echo," it said. "What remains when creation ends and begins again?" Eli stepped closer, his voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" The echo smiled faintly. "To warn you." Kale's wings folded tightly. "About what?" The echo turned its gaze toward the horizon, where the silver light began to fade into gray. "The gods sleep, yes," it said, "but dreams can burn too." A cold wind swept across the mountain. Carrying a whisper like broken glass, Kale felt his fire shiver. Eli felt the ground shift beneath his feet. The echo's eyes dimmed. The forgotten flame seeks form again, and this time it remembers envy. Then the echo faded like mist, leaving behind a single spark floating between them. Kale caught it in his palm. The spark pulsed once, twice, then sank into his skin. Eli looked at him in fear. What was that? Kyle's voice was quiet. A memory, done or a warning. As they climbed down the mountain, the sun began to dim behind a strange red haze. Birds flew low, rivers slowed. The air grew heavy. Eli stopped and looked back. "Kyle, is it happening again?" Kyle didn't answer. He looked toward the darkening horizon where firelight flickered faintly behind the clouds, and deep inside his chest something new, something ancient, began to stir. That night, as stars vanished one by one, Eli awoke to a sound, a soft whistle, the same tune he once played to calm the fire. But this time, it came not from him, but from the wind itself. And it sounded like the gods had begun to dream again. When the gods began to dream again, the night was heavy with silence. The stars had vanished, swallowed by the red haze that spread across the sky like slow fire. Eli stood on the cliff beside Kale, the wind thick and warm, carrying the scent of ash. The whistle hung around his neck, glowing faintly as if alive. Kale's golden scales were dim, reflecting the dying light. He had not spoken since the echo's warning. Now he turned his head slightly, eyes full of something Eli had never seen before. Fear. "The world is breathing wrong," Kyle whispered. It remembers what it was before we sang. Far below, the ground cracked, and rivers of fire spilled from the mountains. But the flames were not red, they were black. Like ink that burned, Eli stepped forward, the heat pressing against his face. "This isn't the same fire," he said. "It's colder," Kyle nodded slowly. "Because it was never meant to warm." They could hear whispers now. 1,000 voices overlapping, crying, laughing, begging. Kyle recognized them. The voices of dragons long dead, of gods long asleep, and beneath them, one voice louder than the rest. "You woke us, little prince. But you forgot what we became." The ground split open, and from the rift rose a figure made entirely of shadow and flame. It moved like smoke, but its eyes burned like suns. Eli felt the air leave his lungs. "Kale, what is that?" Kyle's wings spread slowly. The first flame, the one that refused to die. The creature looked at them, and the mountain trembled. "I am what remains when creation loses its song," it said, its voice echoing inside their bones. Kale stepped forward, his voice steady. "You are envy," the creature smiled. "I am everything the gods forgot to forgive." Eli raised the whistle, his hands shaking. "We can stop this." Kyle's eyes glowed brighter. "No," he said softly. "We can only listen." He closed his eyes, letting the ancient fire flow through him. His heart burned with every memory. The gods' laughter, their sorrow, their endless hunger. And in that storm of voices, he found one, small, human, and clear. It was Eli's voice. "Breathe, Kale," it whispered. "Just breathe." Kale opened his wings wide, the heat tearing the air. The black fire surged toward him, trying to consume him, but this time, he did not fight it. He embraced it. The dark flames entered him, and light exploded from his body. Pure and blinding, Eli covered his face, tears burning his skin. He could hear Kyle's voice inside the roar, calm and strong. "I am the flame, and the flame remembers love," the dark fire screamed. Writhing, twisting, breaking apart, the mountain shook as the sky split open. Light poured down like rain, golden and gentle. The shadow dissolved into the wind, leaving behind nothing but warmth. Eli opened his eyes slowly. Kale was standing before him, surrounded by a soft glow. His wings were made of light, not fire, his body calm and peaceful. Eli fell to his knees. "Kyle, how you did it?" Kyle smiled faintly. "No," he said. "We sang it away." The world around them began to change. The fire faded into flowers, the ash into soil, the silence into song. The air was filled with a low hum, the sound of life remembering itself above them. The clouds turned golden, and from the light, the echo appeared one last time. "You have balanced the breath," it said, its voice soft as rain. Eli looked up. "What happens now?" The echo smiled. "Now the gods will sleep again, but they will dream of kindness this time." Kale looked toward the horizon. "And us?" The echo's eyes glowed faintly. "You will live, and remind them again when they forget." Then the echo faded, and the world settled into silence. Eli looked at Kyle. "So you're glowing," Kale chuckled softly. "Maybe that's what happens when a dragon finally learns to breathe." Eli laughed, tears still shining on his face. "And when a janitor teaches him how," they stood together as the dawn rose, not burning, but golden. The sky shimmered with calm light, and the wind carried the sound of a whistle. It was no longer just a song. It was a promise that fire could be gentle, that gods could dream again, and that even in the heart of flame, humanity could still be found. The dragon prince spread his wings one last time. Eli climbed onto his back, the whistle shining bright against his chest. They rose into the morning sky, leaving trails of light behind them, and as they vanished into the sun, the world below whispered their story. "He taught the dragon prince to whistle," it said, "and awoke the fire the gods had forgotten. The end. Enjoyed the story? Like it and subscribe for more."